We now move to Part 3, debate on clauses 25 to 61 and Schedule 2.2. The question is that Part 3 stand part. The question is that Part... The Honourable Liam Dalzell.
Sorry, I thought... I don't know what I was thinking. Part 3 is in relation to the... general information gathering and enforcement powers. The reason that I wanted to speak on this part was because of the point that my colleague Charles Chauvel made in relation to Part 2, and because it does flow into this area as well. And that is that one of the reasons for having the Financial Markets Authority is to gather together the different enforcement functions of our various regulators in this area and to give it some teeth. And I support that 100%, which is why, generally speaking, we're supporting this bill. But what hasn't really been resolved is that a number of the hold-ups in terms of the investigations around the financial company failures have actually related to the involvement of the Serious Fraud Office, and there is nothing in this bill that changes that at all. And I don't know how it gets resolved without having some sort of revisiting, as it were, of the fraud aspects of the Serious Fraud Office. And I think we could have done that if we'd proceeded with the reintegration of the Serious Fraud Office into the police, as we had been planning to do prior to the 2008 general election, because then you could shift the extensive criminal investigation work from the Serious Fraud Office into this body, and that, I'm sure, would give it the teeth that we are really looking for. Because what the problem that I had at the time when we were considering the reality of the financial company failures was that every time somebody would raise a question about why the particular issue wasn't being investigated, there always was because the matter had been referred to the Serious Fraud Office. And I can't see how this legislation is going to fix that fundamental flaw in our system. And I do hope that the government does take an opportunity when it reviews this legislation and later on down the track through the securities legislation as to whether that is a flaw that could be remedied by way of that particular piece of legislation. I know it's this legislation that needs to be reviewed, and maybe it's the Serious Fraud Office legislation that needs to be reviewed as well, but it does seem to me that everything goes on hold while they do that work. Now, the work of the sharing of information that's contained within this bill should free things up a little bit, but it's not clear to me, and maybe the Minister would like to put on record what the government's position is on how this will apply in practice. But the question is will the fact that the Serious Fraud Office are investigating a particular allegation of fraud mean that the Financial Markets Authority will have to hold back its investigation while that investigation is conducted? Because that's the question. And if the Minister can give us an absolute assurance that the Financial Markets Authority will be able to continue its investigation unimpeded by the investigation of the Serious Fraud Office, then I would have some comfort. But I actually don't know that comfort can be given, because there is this essential conflict between the two roles, and yet they've both got very similar functions in terms of bringing wrongdoers to account, as it were, one from a regulatory perspective and the other from the criminal law. But now that we've brought in criminal liability, I just wonder whether we have got that absolutely right. And I really would be interested in some of the government participating in the debate and exploring this issue, because we did discuss it at the Select Committee a little bit, but we didn't really get to a conclusion that I think gives me the assurance that this will be able to to take on that particular issue. I think that's to me the main thing in relation to that issue. But there is another very important subpart in this part, and that is the provision relating to the FMA, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, and for me, in some ways, this is actually the most important part of the bill, and that is the FMA may exercise a person's right of action. And I think this was absent from the previous regime, and I think that it will give people confidence that the new regime can step into play in a way that the previous regime could not. And I think that this is a tremendous advance in the interests of those mum and dad investors that we talk about from time to time, because what it enables the Financial Markets Authority to do is to step in and take action in the shoes of those who otherwise may be prevented or ill-equipped or impecunious in terms of their capacity to take proceedings to seek damages or other relief for fraud, negligence, default, breach of duty or other misconduct. And I think this is the strength of this bill, and I'm absolutely I'm delighted that we were able to reach an agreement across party lines that this was an essential feature of the future. And if we didn't have this, there would still be the reality that people would miss out on having their cause of action proceeded on their behalf when they weren't in a position to do so. And it also enables people to take some comfort from the fact that the avoidance techniques that are used to ensure that companies' assets are not traced back to those who inappropriately have taken them for themselves, that searching can carry on regardless of the interests that would otherwise be protected by our company law. So, and that says to me that we are essentially in this legislation putting the rights of people, to be treated with fairness and dignity in these circumstances ahead of perhaps the corporate veil, as they call it, and I think that that's an extremely positive move, and one that I'm very supportive of. We did have a lot of debate around it in the Select Committee. There were a lot of submissions on this particular provision, and there were very strong views about its appropriateness for the legislation. I have to say there are a number of people who I'm actually quite disappointed in terms of their representations to the Select Committee about removing this. But I think that we've done the right thing. I think that the advice that we received on this at the end of the day is the correct advice, and I believe that this will stand our country in good stead and our financial markets in good stead for a very, very long time to come. And so those were really the main points that I wanted to make in relation to this particular part. I know that there are a number of other provisions on it. I think they're the two provisions that I think are essential to the successful operation of the FMA, and I'm very, very pleased that we've been able to play a role in making sure that we've created a very workable resolution to the issues that were put in front of us on that matter.
Members, we come to the vote on Part 3, but we have a Minister's amendment as set out on SOP number 222. The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary will say no. The ayes have it. Members, the question now is that Part 3 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary will say no. The ayes have it. We now move to Part 4, debate on clauses 62 to